What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Microcast. Today's episode is hosted by me, TJ David, and Zoe Rome.
We're going to be working off the same framework as the last few weeks. We're going to start by diving into our Chumbawamba moment and then getting into the San Juan Summer Solstice 50-miler and other things TJ and I worked through this week. From there, we're going to go into some important characteristics we've seen in the greatest champions of our sport. So much of this we've found is rooted in values, and we'll finish up our call by taking a deep dive into why these values matter for athletes as well as Microcosm community members.
Nice. Way to nail the intro off the cuff, Zoe.
I'm just really good at making things up as I go.
I love it. All right. Well, that's what we're getting into. Let's kick it right off with the Chumbawamba moment.
So this is a moment from the week where we got knocked down, but gosh darn it, we got back up again.
Yeah. You want to kick this off?
Sure. So I did something I've never done before, which is I did 2 stand-up shows within the space of a week. Typically, when I do stand-up, I start by workshopping parts of my set at an open mic and then stringing together different 5-minute bits into a 10 to 15-minute set.
Maybe we should stop it here for 1 second because does the audience know that you're a comedian?
Well, they do now. I think my obvious
in
charisma and
improv?
humor. Right. So backing up, about a year ago, I got back. I did a lot of comedy in college, and I got away from it as an adult. So I was like, I'm a serious writer. I don't have time to, write jokes, and I don't have time to play. That's not, something that I need to do. I need to pursue serious journalism and serious running. And then last winter in 2022, I hurt my Achilles tendon and had to take some focused time off of running, and that time prompted reflection with okay, I need other stuff in my life. I need another way to connect with people. I need another way to have fun. And I found myself alone on the couch a lot, watching a lot of stand-up. And I was like, this is something I used to really enjoy when I did it in college. It's something that I really enjoyed, the community that you can build around it. And I enjoy the process of getting up in front of people and trying stuff and taking the feedback you get from the crowd and honing your set and developing it and writing and rewriting and practicing and, workshopping and putting together a set or a show. So I got back into it last year, and it's only been this winter that I started actually doing serious paid gigs. So this week, for the first time, I had 2 paid ticketed shows back to back, which is not something I've had the opportunity to do. So I ran a set that I've been developing for several months at this point, with some new stuff as well that I hadn't really tried in front of a crowd before, which felt kind of scary and exciting and vulnerable. And so I did the set at a show in Carbondale, which I was really excited about because I got to invite a lot of people in my life to come see me do comedy for the first time, which was really meaningful to me. And it went fine. It wasn't bad. There were some parts that really killed, and there were some parts that I felt like the energy fluctuated pretty dramatically, even though I really had confidence in the material. I always tape my sets so I can go back and watch and critique and tweak as I go. And I spent a week kind of sitting with that set and being like, you know what? I think that some of the stuff that didn't work, it's not necessarily because the bit wasn't good. It was because I was doing the show for a crowd outside, and it was kind of like an older group. It was in the daylight. And so much of making comedy work is about putting together the right room. You want people to be close together, because if the person you're sitting next to laughs, you're going to be a little more permissive with your own laughter. And humans really feed off each other's energy. So packing people in close, turning the lights off, really establishes a place where people have the psychological security to laugh and connect together and to kind of get on that same wavelength and really let themselves enjoy the show. And even though it was fun to do comedy outside, it definitely presents a challenge because the feedback you get from the crowd is so much different because people are really spread out. And it just creates a different atmosphere, and people are a little less able to just fully LOL. So I took that same set and I ran with it again at a late night show in Aspen, and in an actual club setting with cute little tables that have a little candle on them. and stuff that didn't really work in Carbondale killed. Like, I had people coming up after me after the show telling me how much they loved it and how they'd never heard anything like it. And I think that to me affirms the sense that, like, if you're cultivating something and you know in your heart and in your mind that it's good, it's not going to resonate in every room. Find the room that it resonates in. But also never lose your sense of humility and your ability to continue to use feedback from the crowd. And I think comedy is just like a really fun and easy way to like continually fail and iterate and learn and get knocked down and get back up again. So that's my Chumbawamba moment.
But so I'm like, that didn't sound like a Chumbawamba moment. What exactly happened between the first and the second shows there? Were you feeling like your material for a little bit? Were you judging your material or something?
Yeah, I was judging my material because I've kind of taken my onstage persona and my content in a direction that I feel is a lot more in line with who I am as a person in real life. It has like a very strong feminist angle, and that's not going to vibe with everyone, right? Like, some people are just, it's going to go over their heads, or they're not going to think it's funny, and it's not going to resonate with everyone's experience. And while I do want to create a show that like invites everyone to laugh, I think for me, my comedic true north is to write jokes that I wanted to hear when I was a younger woman. Like, when I was someone who's a little less confident in who I am and who felt a little less secure in their identity. And so I always want to write comedy that speaks to folks who aren't always seen in comedy, particularly here, where it's like a lot of dudes telling kind of bro jokes. My comedy has like a pretty intellectual feminist bent, and like, I tried, this is the one joke that I have to cut out of my set because I tried it twice and it just didn't work, was like a David Foster Wallace joke, and people don't get it, they don't love it, and I'm ready to kill my darlings and move on from that one.
I won't take credit for any feedback on that joke originally.
TJ immediately told me to cut it. He was like, no one's going to get that. And I was like, I'm going to try it. And he was like, see, no one got it. And I was like, let me try it one more time. Lo and behold, that feedback was spot on.
You're hearing it first, folks. I was right about something.
TJ was right about comedy.
I just think that it's really interesting because you're opening yourself up. You're being very vulnerable up there. You're spending time writing a lot of material. This is different than some folks might already be familiar that you're in Consensual Improv, which is an improv troupe in the Valley, and you've been doing that for a while and did that in college. And this is, a hobby that is quickly turning into a profession in a way, because you are making money off this, both of those things. And I think that's
so much money. Oh my God.
Yeah. $50s of dollars,
dozens of dollars.
But it's cool, to see you taking something that is challenging. It's involves creativity. And again, we're going to talk a lot about values later, but it's a really values driven thing for you.
Yeah.
Touches on a lot of key points, but it's also one of those things where it could be really humbling.
Oh, dude, it's so like the first show I did it was in February. The first show I did was a contest to see who would get to open for the like national, like big name comedians like Trevor Noah who come through the Valley. And I bombed so hard at this contest. I was not as prepared as I would have liked to have been. I had good material, but I just didn't bring my A game, and I was kind of like out of shape and unpracticed. And I bombed so hard. And I bombed hard in front of a panel of 8 judges. I bombed hard in front of some of Colorado's best comedians. Ooh. I bombed hard in front of my best friends. And I was fine. Nothing happened. My life continued. Everything was fine. My friend still took me out for a beer afterwards. We still celebrated. My friend Ryan, won the contest. And we celebrated him as if we had all won, because we did. Because when your friend wins, everyone wins.
Oh, we're all on the same team.
We're all on the same team. Like,
love that.
In comedy especially, like, I can't just go do a show by myself. I need my friends there to like open for me or to close for me or to like give me feedback. And comedy is truly a team sport disguised as a single person sport. And it's just such an excellent way to get really good at resilience.
Yeah, I like that. And so it really is a Chumbawamba moment when you go out there and, you got a lot of laughs at that show at Tiny Pine, but it wasn't maybe what you were hoping for. And I think
it wasn't what I believed that set was capable of.
Yeah.
I believed that if I continued to let my true voice come through in the comedy, I would find a room that would love it. And I found that room.
I'm already seeing how this translates over into athletics and other parts of life. I
Yeah.
feel like this is, again, we have these vehicles
Right.
that we get to use, and that's just it's cool to see you using comedy as one of those things.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
TJ, what was your Chumbawamba moment?
But this was a tough week for me. As I was, mentioning to you on Friday, I was just trying to stay grounded this week and keep both feet on the ground because I'm in the heat of Leadville training, and I was feeling the not having a full day off last weekend, working all day Saturday, crewing Kyle.
It turns out crewing Zoe is exhausting.
Yeah, well, we'll get into it more because.
Did I make it additionally exhausting? Yes, I did.
I'm not coming in here with that kind of criticism.
I mean, I know it's not criticism, but the facts were that I spent a non-zero amount of time vomiting in bed, so I was a high-touch athlete for a moment there.
Yeah. Well,
spoiler alert. It's just a teaser. Breadcrumbing.
You did great. Kyle also, one of my athletes, I was crewing him too, and he rallied really hard. It was just a tough day for everybody out there, and I think for supporters, it's equally as tough, and, networking and doing some marketing for Microcosm and things like that. I don't know. I finished the week with a big long run. I was pretty proud of that. And I kind of started this week tired, and it was a really busy week. And I felt like, I was showing up every day as my best self, but kind of like that battery was depleting. And so, I don't know why I did this, but on Saturday, on Friday, I was like, I'm gonna do a really hard run on Saturday. Like, my prescribed run was 16 miles with a great vert. So I interpreted that as doing a very difficult run with 6,000 feet of vert. And
that's pretty great.
Yeah, that was great. But I kind of knew on the heels of a big week, I was putting myself in a position to have some both mental challenges as well as physical challenges. And the run really became a vehicle for self-judgment at times. And although I was like kind of liking that because it was giving me the opportunity to really like rise up with my tools and step into, my spirit self, or like try to remove the ego from the situation, try to use certain tools and techniques that help me work through the challenges, it still was just really hard. And I finished feeling pretty shitty.
Yeah. For context, we went out for lunch after, and TJ didn't even eat a pita pocket, which
it took a while.
Strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a very good pita.
I did get my protein in after, for those of you who have been following along with the
hashtag
podcast.
TJ's protein journey.
But I wasn't sure like how the week would end up. And so I really rested hard yesterday after the run, and it felt good just to put the coaching aside, put the work aside. I think for those people who really know me know that like, if I'm not at my computer coaching an athlete, I'm working on my business and visualizing and spending time. It's hard to just like turn off. And I really focused yesterday on just like shutting it down. I watched a few hours of Netflix and put the squeeze pants on, and ate really well, and just I ended up rallying for a really great run today. And equally a challenging run with a lot of vert and a lot of climbing, and it was a better run than yesterday. And so I was kind of proud that I gave myself the opportunity to finish the week strong and on a high note, and not carry with me any of the judgment about yesterday's run being slower than I felt like it should have been, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I always tell athletes that it's always normal to have a Sunday run that doesn't feel that good, but it is super awesome to have a Sunday run that feels a little bit better than Saturday. That's a great sign that you are addressing, like if there's any sort of like fueling recovery issues, you're addressing them, you're learning, and you're chumbawamba-ing to come back stronger the next day. And like that is even more like having one good day, anyone can do that, but not like the sign of a great athlete is someone who's able to have a hard day and then flip it around and go out and make the next day great.
Yeah. And I think that's just like again, as I've been doing this for a long time and I don't always get that right.
Right. I mean,
But
there's just going to be some Sundays that suck, and that is, I guess, the Lord of ultra running's way of keeping us humble.
the more you do this, though, I think the better the opportunity is and the chance of making that Sunday run better, which is kind of, the overall, I feel like the overall trend. It's not linear, but it's trending upwards.
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm pretty stoked on that. And I feel better today than last Sunday when we got home from the San Juan. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really wanted to talk about the San Juan Summer Solstice 50. That's kind of what I'm into this week. I know that's what you've been into because you've been recovering from it, and you literally ran the race. I checked out part of the course, and I'll tell you, it's the real deal. It's
really cool, man.
But maybe just to give the listeners out there, you came into a little perspective and context. You came into this with a particular plan for execution. It wasn't it wasn't your normal approach. Talk to the folks out there about your approach to this race.
Yeah, so the last couple of races I had done, there was a really strong international elite field, so I approached it with a bit more of a mindset of like, I can race my way onto the podium. I talked with my coach, David Roche, the day before San Juan Summer Solstice, and he told me that we should put ourselves in a position to win from the gun, and that he really wanted me to race it intentionally a little earlier than I was maybe used to. I think I tend to really turn things on a bit later in the race, and I have really good fatigue resistance that I've been able to capitalize on. But my coach and I really wanted to see what happened when I put myself on the sharp end a little earlier than I'm used to, which is also a slightly different mindset that I'm used to as well. I usually tend to go out pretty conservative. I would call myself I would say I use the word smart, but in my head, I kind of know that the word I'm thinking is conservative.
Yeah, conservative.
Racer.
And you tend to do really well in the second half of races as a result of that. But I think what I extrapolate from this conversation, something that you've probably begun learning about yourself, is you might be leaving a little potential out there because you do kind of start conservatively.
Correct. Yeah. So my coach was like, let's race every step of this and see what happens. And I think that was a really fun way to frame this because it was not tied to the outcome. It was like, try to win, not go win. It was, race with the intention of winning and see what happens, what comes up. And I would say that it was a bit of a foreign mindset at first, and then I settled into it, and it actually felt really exciting and comfortable and homey in a way. It didn't feel inauthentic. It felt really good. And I did some of my best running for like 35-ish miles, and then ran into some, I going to problem solve this down the road. And like, spoiler alert, we don't know exactly what happened, but it seemed like I ran into some electrolyte issues and some hyponatremia from excessive water without sufficient sodium, and just kind of led to me falling apart going into the mile 40 aid station. But what I'm proud of is, even though I got past and it soon became clear that like, winning, that's going to be a stretch goal, and like, ooh, podium, that's becoming a stretch goal rapidly, and like, ooh, finishing, that seems like a quality goal. I came into the mile 41 aid station where I could see TJ I was in rough shape, but I think my attitude was really positive, and I kept telling him like, I'll do what it takes to turn this around.
Yeah, and actually there wasn't any negativity or self-judgment. That was something that really stood out to me as you came into that aid station, and you kind of gave me the lowdown on like, hey, I'm feeling this way, things have kind of gone south, and you were very like pragmatic about it. You were talking about the facts. You weren't judging. You weren't assigning any like, this was good, this was bad. And I think that like, for me as the outsider, it was very easy for me to work with you in the aid station because like we weren't having to calm your emotions down, or you weren't reacting emotionally. You were just taking in the situation. You were extremely present, and we did what we needed to do. got you some extra fluids, electrolytes, and you were just like, I'm just going to do the best that I can here. And like, I think there was no, you were still like, I can get back on the podium. You weren't,
I was still going to try to,
you were still focused on those other women were right there. I mean, they were in the aid station with you, and, it was unfortunate to see them, catch up to you when you were running so strong early in the race.
I took a 3-minute rest in a puddle.
Yeah, it was hot out there.
Yeah, things went downhill fast.
Yeah. But, I think there's a lot of, it's just, there's so much to take out of this, because I think the first thing is like, this really was, you had a pretty strong reaction when you crossed the finish line in the hours after the race. You were upset that you weren't able to hold on and win. And I think very quickly you brought yourself back to process. And I don't want to assign any of my judgment or expectations on you, but I was like, oh, this is great to see. It was really great to see you flip the switch and take it back to the point of this was to be on the sharp end. The point of this was to dictate the race effort for everyone else.
Yeah.
And you succeeded.
I wanted to be the protagonist of the race. And I was doing that for a while. Like, that was my goal. And the goal that I agreed upon with my coach was to learn what I needed to learn and to put myself in that position for things to get a little bit spicy. So now I'm going to be able to learn things that I can implement later to extend my ability to kind of like, run the show from the front, which is, I think, something I'm going to be doing a bit more in my racing. And I think that, something that was pretty impactful for me is like, I was pretty upset at first. Like, I was pretty sick at first. And then at second, I had some feelings, felt my feelings, because I was disappointed. I put a lot of work into this race specifically, but it is just one stop on my way to bigger things. That doesn't mean it was unimportant. That doesn't mean I was completely detached from the outcome, but what happened out there is what I needed to happen so that I can achieve my true goals down the road.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think that that's just so important to be able to experience all sides of the race. I have races where I'm conservative. I have races where, maybe I'm getting a little flirty with the potential. And then there's races where my goal is just to dictate. And like, you can't know yourself if you don't experience races on all sides of that spectrum. Like, you really can't be pushing and pursuing excellence as an athlete if you aren't getting to know yourself as an athlete. And so this was a big opportunity for that.
Yeah. And going back to comedy, it's a pretty similar mentality. Like, I could have run the same set I was running all winter that I had practiced and that I knew would get some ha-has and is like, fine. But I wanted to do something new. I wanted to do something that was really in my voice, that was my story, and that felt true to me. And whenever you're doing something new and exciting and kind of on the pointy end of what you're capable of, you are opening yourself up to, you could bomb the set, you could lose the race. And, but that is neutral feedback that is now available to you so that you can do better at the next race, so that you can do better at the next set. And I think that sometimes you have to bomb to learn that stuff. And I think it's all about who's able to view those things as additional data to do better down the road.
Right. And again, let's zoom out and really think about what you just said. You're using that as data. Mm-hmm. You're not using that as a judgment. You're not
using it as judgment.
Right. You're not saying I am bad. This was bad. I'm a bad runner. All of these things that pull us back down and make it harder for us to really find and flirt with that potential. And, this is something that the champions do really, really well. Mm-hmm. They have that ability to move on quickly and non-judgmentally, even when like a race or a match or whatever it is doesn't go their way. If they don't win or they don't perform up to their standard. And I think this is really, really key, because there's a huge difference between evaluating a performance and assigning judgment to a performance.
Right. Yeah. Right. Like, is my set bad? No. Is there, like, can I learn things from how it interacted with the crowd that can help me develop it for later? Yes. Was that a bad race? well, I guess if you just looked at the time on a piece of paper, maybe. But if you look at what I was able to learn from it, the fact that I walked away with like 3 new best friends, like on like to me, this race was a huge success. And that is what my coach reinforced with me as well.
Yeah. And it's a choice to have that perspective. And I think I'm going to just go out there and say it. That's a winning perspective in my mind.
Yeah, it's not just about winning, but it's like, I think it would be silly to look at that information and say, no, thanks. I'd rather be grumpy and like, self-judgmental rather than like rather than harvest this information. I just think that like if you can lose a lot of valuable lessons and learning if you just wallow too much in the like, oh, this was bad, this was a failure, I only see things in black and white. Again, I would have loved to have had a different outcome, I would have loved a different result, but I'm also very happy to walk away with knowledge and knowing like, okay, I definitely glimpsed my potential during this race, and now I know some specific things that I need to do that again. Like, look out, anyone racing that person in the future.
Yeah. And I just, again, you were kind of like what people aren't going to be able to see when they listen to this and they just hear your voice is like you kind of smirking a little bit around the idea of like not like the option to like be critical and not like take this as what I said as a win and move forward with it. Because we have coached hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And we see people and work with people every day who are struggling to have that perspective and make that choice, which is why this is such an important conversation, because when we choose to take what on paper, someone who doesn't know the context of the experience, know what process-oriented goals you were going into this race with, knowing, you were there for very specific reasons, they might be like, oh, that time is slow, and instead, there's all of this great context to it, which is adding to your story, which is your story that's moving you forward to be the one who dictates at races, who finds their potential in events and at races, and who, is running to win races, but ultimately running for growth and for many other deeper things too. And it's a choice that you're able to make because you've developed awareness around these things, and it's really powerful.
Totally.
I think it's
and like I've been racing 50s since 2016, so like not my first rodeo, and it gets easier. Like it gets easier to have a bad race and to move on, and like that sounds like not a fun thing to practice, but anyone who's like had success in ultra running knows you kind of have to practice having a bad race and moving on.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard when it's these longer distance events that demand a lot from you physically, and for you to give your all and like kind of be in the place where I was in, where I was working together with my friend Genevieve just to finish. Like that isn't my favorite thing in the world, but it's also kind of my favorite thing in the world to like use I mean, again, you don't ever get to decide the outcome, but if I hadn't have put all that work into it, I wouldn't have been able to finish at all. And it gets easier. Like resilience is a learned skill. I am not different than anyone. I am good at this because I have practiced it, and I practice it in every aspect of my life.
I love it. And it's just so important. And again, zooming out all of this stuff, you brought us back. You told, oh, look at how I was doing that in comedy this week. Okay. Same skill set expressing itself and being used in sport. And then you can again go and use that in relationship, or go again and use that in your work and at outside or something like that. And this stuff all translates. But something that's really cool that I've been thinking about so much is just like,
what are you into? Oh my gosh, you're about to hear what you're into.
I'm into this. This is what I'm into. I've been thinking a lot about this race and kind of relating it to what I was seeing. I was all out there all day. But I was also
life in a day.
Yeah, life in a day watching these guys race. But I was also kind of watching the live stream at Western States too, and just seeing a lot of athletes who previously had described themselves as maybe more conservative, racing faster at the beginning, seeing Courtney's performance, just really being on the gas all day long and really dictating and just going for it. And it really reminded me that, great athletes are not afraid to go for it. They are not, the outcome that they're all hoping for is the win. We know that, but there are deeper things there that are going on. And when they aren't afraid to lose, they
that's when you're the most powerful.
Exactly. And that's what I really saw in you in that first, coming through that first crew point at mile 15. You'd already been running for like 3 hours and done like 6,000 feet of elevation.
We had already crossed the scariest effing snowfield I have ever crossed. And we had already like fully like hand over hand scrambled through like a little keyhole boulder problem. Like we'd already seen some shit that day.
Yeah. And it's like, what I saw was like an athlete who really wasn't afraid to lose. And like by all, me being out there, being a coach, I'm like, oh, it's pretty early for Zoe to be like, I'm dictating it from here. Like I know what I'm doing.
I'm pretty sure I came into the first aid station. I was like, TJ, today's my day.
Yeah.
The second time I saw him, I was like, TJ, I don't know if this is my day.
But like, you weren't afraid because like, you are amazing and awesome, whether you won that race or not. And I think just
nothing in my life, like, winner, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all.
Right.
But I feel good with the information I learned. And again, like I walked away with like 4 dope female friends from this race, and I think that like is really, we're going to talk about values later, but for me, connecting with other women in the sport, uplifting other women, working together with other women, like that is a thing I care about a lot. And sometimes you do that by leading the race and being the protagonist and pulling other women along with you. And sometimes you do that by, finding your friend out in the woods and saying, let's do this together, because doing it alone sounds really hard.
Yeah. But you still finished. And, a lot of athletes out there, and this is maybe controversial to say, but there's a lot of professional runners who, when they don't have their day, they just DNF.
Yeah.
And you and I have always talked about with each other and with our athletes, like the primary goal is to finish. Not, it's never given. Even with all the best training, it's still somewhat uncertain, and you're just setting yourself up to have the best possible day that you can. And like, if the performance goal and the outcome goal, if those go out the window and it's just down to finishing and you got your process oriented goals in that, that's enough. And like, I think a lot of athletes in our sport need to continue to push that idea forward. I know that I am, and I've been in situations where I've wanted, at CCC, I really wanted to DNF, having a crappy day, and I gutted it out and stayed out there, and I'm proud of that at this point.
I looked at you at the halfway point and I was like, here's the bad news is I think you're okay to continue.
Yeah. And I was like,
and that's not what you wanted to hear.
No, because when you're throwing up all day long,
you want your buddy to tell you that you should quit.
So I don't know, some reflections, like, watching everybody at Western, watching you, I saw a lot of athletes who weren't afraid to lose. And to me, that I'm seeing athletes who are going to be, that are really strong in themselves and their self-awareness. They have a strong relationship with themselves, because if you're afraid to lose, you're just, your ego is guarding. You're afraid of what it's going to feel like if you don't win, and you need the win for validation. And that's not a great place to race from. That's like almost a desperate place to race from. Instead, racing because you want to win, you want to experience your potential, you want to go for it. And that's like what the greats are really great at doing. Like, they're not afraid to go for it. They're not afraid to lay it out there on the line. And I think that's like what is so different, about, the Courtneys and of the world, and the Killians, and, there's just Western States in the men's field. I mean, what example, all like top 3 guys were really going for it. And it's just like, I'm so impressed by that. And I think that, it's when you're not afraid to lose, you have that opportunity to tap into like who you really are.
Yeah.
And that's where you experience flow. And that's like where you really access like your like innate talents and abilities those genetic gifts.
Yeah. And I think that something that's always helpful for me is understanding how long the horizon of my race season in my career is. I would really encourage athletes to, maybe stretch themselves and put more goals. This is like a super general statement, but if you're the type of person who doesn't race much, maybe put a couple other races on the calendar to like get this experience and to push yourself and experiment with different mindsets and to get vulnerable. If you're someone who tends to race as a means of undermining their potential, that's a totally different thing, and you should disregard what I just said.
Yeah, and
because we see it all. Everyone's everywhere, right? Like we've seen, and people can be both things at points in their career, but I think I coach a lot of folks who maybe have racing does feel really vulnerable for them. And I think that I've just gotten more comfortable having results at races because I've practiced it. And that is what puts me in the position to, be on the podium of UTMB races.
It's just so awesome. I mean, I was really impressed and inspired by that. And it really mirrors, what I'm trying to go for in my own racing and what I was really hoping for at UTMB Argentina, but it just didn't work out that way because I got lost so many times at the beginning of the race. And, it's just sometimes it doesn't work out, but like.
And that's why you should do this for years and years and years.
Yeah, because that's really, it is a long-term process. We're talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Like I'm heading into Leadville.
Yeah.
I ran my first ultra unsupported about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, it's taken me this long to feel like I'm ready to go push my potential at 100, and I'm not afraid to, go out there and see where it goes and maybe blow up in the process, or maybe have a finish that looked like CCC, or
you're going to be on the sharp end.
Experience potential, whatever it is. I know because that can't hurt me. It's just a race.
Yeah.
That doesn't have anything to do with who I am. It's just something I like to do. It's a part of my identity.
But we won't even know you did it. You could win the race and she wouldn't know or care.
Yeah.
You could DNF at mile 2 and you're going to get the same puppy smooches.
I don't know. I thought this was, for me, seeing you do that race that way, and then seeing, Jeff, who is a really close, friend of yours and friend of mine, and like someone we've gotten to run with and get to know, like really go out and put himself out there like that. Tyler Green and like other guys who are just like considered more conservative, just really just put that all aside and just go. I mean, there's nothing more inspiring than that in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super awesome. And then obviously Courtney, the greatest.
I mean, could do a whole hour on Courtney.
Jeez, man. Well, I can't wait to see her at Hard Rock in a couple weeks.
Same. Oh my gosh.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Let's talk about some values, because that whole conversation to me was really rooted in values. And I think a common value that we have, maybe to kick it off, is this value of excellence.
Actually, can we back it up just like
Sure.
one step? What are values and why are they important here at Microcosm?
I mean, there's something we think a lot about. Obviously we're really curious about values, but to me, a value is like an ideal, something that you have in your mind, in your subconscious, that is helping you stay aligned throughout the day when you make decisions. For me, it's a place of grounding. It's something that I use to help navigate my way through, life.
And values are something that we think about a lot at Microcosm. And I'm curious if you could just kick this conversation off by bringing us into what your individual values are and how the process of prioritizing values-based decision-making has informed what you're creating here at Microcosm.
That's a huge question.
I know. That was like 8 questions in one.
Could use a layup once in a while.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right, okay, I'm going to alley-oop it. What are your values?
Yeah, connection and community. I kind of consider them interchangeable. Growth, excellence, love, and equity are kind of my primary values. And then, creativity is in there too. Did I say growth? Growth is up there. I probably said that right away. But those are my values. Those are the values, that I've also used to drive Microcosm and to develop Microcosm. I've used those values in everything that I've, from developing the community to why we use certain like training logs over others,
Mm-hmm.
to how we communicate with athletes, how often we communicate with like
Yeah.
everything is really rooted, and I'm using that as a guide all the time.
Right. Like exactly. Like it informs small things like what the layout of our logs is, to like how we try to recruit like a diverse base of athletes, how we try to grow the community, how we try to support people, and like even the structure of the business. Like your values are very much baked into the DNA of Microcosm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. It's just, I love it so much to think about because it makes me feel like me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it helps me feel grounded in myself, in my core beliefs, in my essential nature, that kind of thing. Like it really feels like it gets to the point of who I am.
Right. Yeah, so my values are creativity, excellence, environment, compassion, and justice. I think, some things that I've learned about values over time is that they shift and change, and that's totally good and normal. And I think something that I've struggled in getting closer to my values is letting go of shoulds. I think there's some things that like our culture, I've gotten messages from our culture they should value it more than I do. So we did a big meeting at work at outside, and I was in a group with some of my like favorite writers and editors, colleagues that I really look up to and respect a lot. And we were supposed to share what our 5 values were. And at first, I actually felt really, really hesitant to share what mine were because I was like, I'm afraid I'm going to get judged. Like, what if my values don't make me look smart enough, or like I'm a hard enough worker? Like I didn't put hard work as one of my main values. Does that mean I'm lazy? Like what is like, oh my gosh, I felt a little bit of shame sharing what my values were. And then when we came together in our group, when we did share what they were, I found out that most of my colleagues actually had pretty like almost identical values to me. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. People I look up to have like value the same things as me. Not that I need them to like validate it, but I think it gave me permission to embrace them in a new way and to let go of like, yeah, like some things for me aren't like super valuable. Like I didn't put like family, and I think that's something I've always felt like I should value more than I do. But when I look at how I've actually arranged my life, I think that feels pretty consistent. And that's not that I don't love my family or I don't value them, but it isn't a factor that drives a lot of my decision making. And I think that making peace with not shoulding myself when it comes to values has helped me make decisions from a much more clear-headed place and to feel a lot more at peace with like really big life decisions I've made, or even small life decisions.
Yeah, and I think also, what you didn't really mention there is you listed like 5 or 6 values, but we probably all have a lot more values than that.
We all have yeah. I mean, there's not a cap on.
Yeah. And so, I didn't say family, or spirituality, or environment, or empathy, or some of these other things that
And that doesn't mean you're like burning trash or like, cursing God out on the streets. It's like, but I think that having clarity around what you do value and like letting go of, or at least acknowledging like, I value some things higher than others, and that's okay.
Or life circumstances can ask of you to prioritize a certain value more than another, depending on what's going on, what the context is. And sometimes I don't look at that list as a static list,
right?
Or a list where there's a higher. For me, I don't consider there to be a hierarchy.
Totally. And I think something that's been important for me in understanding my values and working to increasingly make decisions from that place is understanding that there is no right answer. Each decision has different but equal options. Saying no to something related to one value might mean saying yes to another value. For example, I might prioritize a work trip over picking a race, or I might choose to prioritize my training rather than committing to crewing a friend. And using a values-based framework helps me evaluate these options in a more nuanced and less judgmental way. Now, giving up on a race isn't bailing on my commitment to athletic excellence, but it's actually me choosing to pursue professional excellence. The goal is to always be careful of over identifying with a different identity that might be creating an imbalance in your values.
Yeah, I don't necessarily look at things that way, but I think that that is a really important and helpful framework to have and to give for athletes, or give to athletes, or really anybody. I kind of, in my ability to understand or have awareness around whether I'm acting in integrity with my values is kind of the feelings that are associated with that. Do I feel whole and complete? Do I feel like I'm operating from a place of abundance? Do I feel like I'm acting with ego or from scarcity or defensiveness? And so I often, when I'm in alignment with my values, I often feel very grounded. I often feel a lot of connection. I often feel like a sense of knowing, like I'm in the right place. I'm very present.
I feel
So that's how it kind of works for me.
Yeah, I tend to feel a quiet confidence when I feel that I'm standing in my integrity.
Yeah.
And I think the way that I like athletes to identify their values, which can be kind of a scary thing to sit down and do, I often see athletes get caught up in shoulds. Like, I should care about this goal rather than really paying attention to whether or not they feel truly attracted to it. So remember that all values are good. And the goal here is to identify what your specific values are and not to judge yourself by how closely they adhere to a certain culture. But also know that the cultures you find yourself in can and will influence how you live out your values.
Oh, totally. I mean, just look at our household. I think, one of the things that you mentioned struggling with was like, I feel judged that hard work isn't one of my values. And I feel that same judgment because I often like incorrectly think that hard work equals like the outcomes you want. That's the route towards joy and all these other things. And so like, is hard work one of my values? Actually, no. I don't even think it's in my top 10. I think like excellence is my value that represents that.
And excellence demands hard work, but it's kind of like hard work is just a process to achieve excellence. And for me, hard work without feeling attached to that ambition and to that excellence falls a little bit flat and doesn't resonate with me as a true value. If it does with someone else, all good. Like, I love that you have that framework to understand how you want to spend your time in your life, but I am more attracted to the pursuit of excellence than just hard work for the sake of hard work.
Yeah, I know for myself that that value doesn't work for me because it leads me to doing things that have negative outcomes.
Sounds like a should rather than a true value.
Yeah.
So some questions that I like athletes to ask themselves when they're assessing what their values are in this order: what things do I feel passionate about? When I look back, what do I want to know that I spent most of my time and energy on? What relationships in my life are meaningful to me? What brings me joy? And I think that those kind of like spending time with those reflections can help us better understand where our values are. And I think you'll notice, like, particularly a question that's been potent for me is when I look back, what do I want to know I spent most of my time and energy on? I've been able to identify my values through making mistakes and spending my time and energy on the wrong things, like hard work or like professional achievement. And, in making those mistakes, or recognition, I think is a value I have discarded and I have moved on from. And I learned that those values don't resonate with me by over attaching myself to them and then saying, no, I actually don't love that I spent that much time and energy on them. And I'm ready to move on and give my time and energy going forward to different things.
Yeah. I like that awareness through, almost the trials and challenges that come from leaning too heavily on things that were should values for you that you thought, those are really based on what you hope other people are perceiving, how they're perceiving you. Like, if hard work is Zoe's value, she's going to be awesome, and like that kind of like external validation, that external perspective. Those should values are almost always it's like from that opposite point of view. It's not like from the inside out, it's from the outside in. And that's an issue.
Right. And like I said earlier, it's important to note that values can shift and change over time. And I think these questions are questions that athletes should revisit regularly, especially after big life changes, like having a kid, taking a step back from career to prioritize balance. These are a framework that we should use to continually assess and audit where we're spending our time and energy so that we can learn and grow and continue to evolve into being more in line with our values. But again, this isn't a pass fail. No one's going to give you a gold star. Really, the only reward is being able to stand in your integrity. And for me, it's living with less anxiety, more connection, and more quiet confidence.
I like the idea of quiet confidence. That sounds really nice. I think something that is just interesting to tie in here to this discussion about values is how we use values to choose the things that we go after, to help us align with the goals that matter to us and the ways that we want to spend our limited time on this planet as people.
Right.
I think it's, athletes often really struggle to choose goals that are actually in alignment with their values. And one of the biggest pitfalls there is because of that outside in perspective, where the thought is, what's the perception of me if I choose this goal? How will that look to the outside? How will that look on social media? How will that look to my friends and family? Is this a valuable way in their perspective for me to spend my time? And so people get in trouble, athletes, we've seen this many times, they're going to get in trouble choosing goals where they're looking from the outside in instead of the inside out. And so again, the goal, although is not a value for me at least, goals are not a value, but the art of choosing a proper goal can and should, in my mind, actually be rooted in values.
Yeah, I think that, it's important to note that like values aren't goals, but goals should be informed by your values. And I think that that's a really poignant way, like when you're thinking about like, okay, how do I want to arrange my race season? How do I want to arrange my training or even my life? Being able to take a step back. And if you're like, you know what, like going to church on Sundays is something I really, really value. That's something that I need to see reflected in my training. Or like, you know what, like going to my granddaughter's graduation in May is really critical for me. I need my training season to reflect that value of family. Or, this is a big time for me at work. And one of my values is career or professional success. We need to like incorporate that into the training. I think people get tripped up when they haven't assessed where their where their values are. And they try to just barrel through life, like trying to do everything or not trying to do anything. And you either feel really overwhelmed and overstretched, and you'll end up pursuing goals, meeting them, and then feeling nothing, rather than feeling more connected, more in tune with yourself, more quiet confidence. And I think that being able to really tie your the specific actions of your daily training to your values will really help, because something that we talk about a lot here is how motivation is overrated. Like motivation will not last. It will not get you out the door when you need it most, but your values will. And if your value is connection with your community, awesome. You've got a reason to run today. Text your friend, get out the door. If your motivation is environment, awesome. You've got a reason to get out the door and to connect with your natural world. If your reason is excellence, boom, great reason to get out the door and get your training done today. So reflecting on what your real values are and then taking specific time to integrate that into the why of your daily training is a really powerful tool to sustain the work that it takes to get anywhere in this sport.
Totally. I really like just reflecting on how some of your values tie directly into the reasoning for and like why it felt so good to try on, I'm going to dictate this race pace this weekend.
Yeah.
Like, I love how that really came from your essential self, your deeper your values, really, which I believe are a part of our essential selves, or that like egoless part of us, like that really pure, like this is a representative of me and who I really am. Like I could sense from you, like the passion that was coming out and like the drive to be out there. And like, that was really pure. And it wasn't like because you were hoping to be perceived a certain way, or you were really looking to have that win so you could talk about it. Like, it
Yeah.
just felt like really, like you were really in alignment.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm acting in alignment with my values, I'm not worried about perception management. I get really caught up in people pleasing and trying to manage how people see me and how they feel about me. And I'm able to release that when I know, no, going for it in this race will help connect me to my community. You know what doesn't connect me to my community? Worrying what strangers on the internet think about me. So, like, how do I actually meet this need? How do I actually fulfill this value I have?
I mean, it's so powerful to even this one concept.
Like, it simultaneously makes you more successful and more resilient in the face of failure.
Yeah, I believe that when it helps you set better boundaries, helps you decide what goals are the right goals for you. It can go so far as to say, like, this is a good coaching match for me.
Yeah.
Like, this is a good training group for me to be in. This is a good community for me to run in or to have support from. Like, all of those things, we're looking for those matchups in our lives, and the way we interpret we interpret it based on feelings, right? But those feelings that we have when we do something are often rooted in like this subconscious process where our minds are thinking about our values. We might not be like out there being like, oh, is this race a good, is this running group a great group for me because like they have the same values as me? No, you're going to go in with the feeling, but you're going to start to know your feelings, and then you're going to get a sense for it. And then later, if you actually reflected on it, I bet you could say like, oh, that's why I like that running group.
Yeah.
Like, we share a lot of common values. Like,
something that I really like about being able to work with the same athletes for years and years is getting to know them and getting to know their values so that I can best support their specific journey and honor those values, right? Like, understanding, oh, this athlete is really motivated by family. Let's talk about how awesome it's going to be when they get to run across the finish line with their kid. Or like, this athlete's really motivated by environment. Awesome. Think about what a big platform they're going to have when they succeed at this race and how many people they're going to be able to bring into climate conversations. Or like, this person really cares about community. Sometimes I see them spreading themselves really thin, trying to support everyone and crew everyone and be involved with everything. How do I help them understand that supporting and showing up for themselves is a way of showing up for their community? How do I identify what matters to this athlete and create training and help them build a program that speaks to that? And I think that that's something that I always really like to get into with my athletes, is like an understanding of like, what do you value, and learning that it's going to be different than what I value. And that's okay. And that's actually the power of good individualized coaching, is that I'm able to meet the athlete on the values they care about and motivate them through those things, rather than trying to be like, well, I value excellence and you should too. If I have an athlete that like that doesn't resonate with them, me yelling at them about it is going to achieve naught.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's a huge plug for athletes out there. If you're listening to this and you're not a big sharer, if you don't want to get vulnerable, if you don't like talking about the things that you care about in the training logs, or want to set up those times to talk with a coach, there is a distinct possibility that you might not be getting the greatest service out of your coach because you're leaving important things out of the picture that play a huge role in the athletic parts of our lives.
Right. Yeah. So if you fall into the category of knowing what your values are and actively withholding them from your coach, go ahead and share. If you don't know what your values are, use this as an invitation to get curious about that, and get curious about having clarity on those things can augment and benefit your training.
Yeah, I know it's obviously made a huge difference for us with where we're at.
I think like overall, it's just helped me feel much more calm, and it's reduced my anxiety about trying to be everything everywhere all at once, understanding that that is impossible, and getting like having to like a struggle for me when I was identifying my values was not being like, I value all these things. I'm a perfect person. So of course I care about family and religion and the environment, like all the same. And I think that releasing myself from that expectation and saying, Zoe, it's okay that you don't care about everything the same. You can't. That's not a good expectation for you to have on yourself. Let's put some of these things in the deprioritize pile. Let's burn some shit. Let's get it out of our lives, and let's get a little more clear on things that do matter to us so we can pursue them more intentionally. I had to Marie Kondo some of my values. It was really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I've seen you do that and work through that, and I've had to do the same thing in my life, and I think this is helpful for us, but the science and the research really backs this up as well, and it's been written about a lot. Some of our favorite books written by Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus talk a lot about the importance of values, the practice of groundedness. There is one of just such an awesome book. And again, peak performance. And so, if you guys haven't checked those out and you want to dive deep on these subjects, I would totally recommend
Yeah.
those listenings.
And again, I think the big takeaway here is allow values to step in and support you on the days where it's really hard to support yourself, when you're feeling unmotivated, when you're feeling disconnected. Identifying, getting clarity around these things and continuing to pursue them wholeheartedly will make a huge difference in your training and in your life as well. And just like in how I make day-to-day decisions, I think a struggle for me was acknowledging that like play is up in my top 10 values. I really value play and playfulness and fun highly. And I felt really silly at first acknowledging that as an adult, like, oh my gosh, I'm not a border collie. Like, I'm a human woman. Like, how can play be so important to me? But in living a life where I more actively embrace play through things like improv comedy and stand up, I feel like a much fuller, I feel like a much more fulfilled person. And bringing that sense of play into my trail running has been really transformative for my athletics, because I'm able to approach it in a much more lighthearted way that has also just made the training more fun, which means I'm able to train more and more sustainably, which has just opened up a whole new realm of like athletic potential for me.
Yeah, I think on a future call, we should, the connection, play connects to joy. Joy perpetuates the process forward. I would love to talk about ways to help inject joy into a process that for a lot of people feels like work, especially when it's about like really digging deep and training for that big stuff. In the longer you do this, and the more that like performance in a race involves some of the specifics of that race and mimicking it and doing things that feel very difficult. Like I talked about the run that I did yesterday, it was purposefully difficult, and maybe the timing with the week wasn't great for me. It was still, it's still beneficial. But how do we inject joy into that process? Because if every day is like yesterday for me, it's going to be much harder, even with strong values, even with excellence, and knowing all the subcategories of that help keep me out there training. It could still lead to burnout. And so that intentional injection of joy or play, or however that shows up for you, we should do a call on how to bring that in.
A call on the science of play, because there's so much. In my next life, I'm going to be Dr. Play PhD. I'm going to get a PhD in play instead of my extracurricular obsession with play. But I mean, there's so much evidence that shows that play is an innate human need. And if you're not servicing that, you're going to maybe be trying to meet that need in other ways that are less healthy and productive, and just are isolating you from, biological needs and drives, and can just let you be like a more connected, fun person. I'm curious, when you were auditing your values, was there anything that surprised you about what you did or didn't value?
Oh gosh.
Did you have any shoulds that came up for you?
I feel like I should value hard work, but it's just, for me, hard work equals overreaching. It's needing to
working for the sake of work.
It's working for the sake of work, but needing to constantly feel like I'm pushing up against like a blow up, or just this big, breakdown, like that I have to be working like that in order to achieve stuff. And it's just incorrect. And, I've spent like a lot of time in the last 4 or 5 years thinking about that. And I think, the training that I've done previously, and some of the work in the service industry that I was, working in before Microcosm, we were able to get up on our feet and do this full time, really led to some like unhealthy, I think, associations with hard work. And it makes it very difficult for me to non-judgmentally to get the rest I need. And I struggled with it. I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
I struggled with it all week, advocating for, the fact that I I need more rest in my life, and like rest isn't hard work. And so like that I should work harder is a really is
the
really
shoulds,
tough.
The shoulds I think are where most people get tripped up. So
Yeah.
beware the shoulds.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't be afraid to just
not care about some shit would be my advice.
I mean, what I was gonna say was just don't be afraid to like introspect on that. You know, I try to do it as non-judgmentally as I can, and you know, sometimes I do. I'm like, dude, that was bad, and saying that's bad is a judgment. But you know, you do the best that you can, and over time, you lean more heavily into what really feels right for you and feels like a good fit. And man, I talked a lot about this on the For the Long Run podcast. People who are interested in, you know, why I transitioned my career as a professional ski mountaineer and skier into, you know, more endurance based sports, and I'm not pursuing skiing at as high of a level, although, you know, sometimes I am, but it's really specific to the circumstances. But that is 100% was decisions rooted in values. So for more back and what resonated with my deep self, my essential self, and what made me feel grounded and steady in my, you know, and at peace with who I am. And so like, I would recommend, if you guys want more examples of that, just to listen in to that conversation.
Yeah.
Let's get into some hot or not here.
Hot or not.
Recycling gel wrappers.
I'm going to say a solid lukewarm, like definitely do this. I feel this is a question I get a lot in like endurance, like whenever I'm asked to speak on environmental issues, and like my caveat is like definitely recycle your gel wrappers, but like that can't be the only environmental action you take. So like, yes, do that, but also like make sure you're doing a lot of other things for the environment as well. And like, don't use that as a way of like excusing consumption. Like, understand that there is no ethical consumption. And just because something can be recycled doesn't mean you're like wiping the carbon implications of it away.
I'm a recycling gel wrappers is not hot. I've never seen at a race, if they've got specific bins for that, I'm a yes.
Shout out to the Leadville Race Series, a zero waste series. Our friend Emily Olson. Yeah. Former Microcosm athlete and friend of the pod. They do a really great job. So I'm just going to shout them out. I'm going to say, generally, maybe not the hottest thing, but at Leadville, super hot.
Yep. When it's available, I think it's, you know, you got to do it.
Yeah. So TerraCycle, I will say, is a program that will do free gel wrapper collection. If you have a relationship with a local running store, oftentimes they can be used as hubs for TerraCycle gel wrapper collection. So talk to your local run stores if you can maybe get a recycling center up and going, if that works for you and your community. Otherwise, you can send in your gel wrappers.
All right. Barefoot running, hot or not?
Not.
I'm a not. I don't think I need any more context on that. All right. Backyard ultra, Zoe, hot or not?
Lukewarm.
I'm hot on it. You know, if an athlete of mine is into it, I am down to support. I've got a couple athletes who actually really are excellent at it and specialize and have won national championships in it. So I'm stoked on it.
Yeah. Shout out Coach Sarah Strong, won a backyard ultra.
Yeah.
In her first 100, went beyond 100 miles to win one of the Colorado backyard ultras. It is a cool format. I don't feel compelled to do it personally, but I love supporting athletes who are chasing it.
There you go. So it's pretty hot.
Sure. Okay. I've been moved to hot.
Pickle juice, hot or not?
So hot. Every form. Oh, love it. Wish I had more of it.
Okay. I'm a not hot on that because you don't know how much sodium unless you've got it portioned out into serving sizes.
I mean,
I don't know what I'm getting.
Sure. But like, what about in daily life? Don't you ever just like drink a little PJ?
I don't, but I do enjoy pickles with
just some PJ in the morning.
No, I don't start the day with
PJ at night.
No,
PJ in the evening.
No, I do like pickles though. In case anybody out there is curious. All right, crop tops, hot or not?
So hot. I used to not be a crop topper. I think some body stuff kept me from embracing how fun it is to just wear half a shirt. One of my favorite quotes is from one of my favorite writers, and she's a fat liberationist and fat activist, Lindy West, who said that like one of the most satisfying things you can do in life is wear a crop top, and the only steps towards wearing a crop top, towards her specific steps are to rock a crop top. All you have to do is rock a crop top and wear it till it feels like a normal top to you. And I love that advice. Like, whatever body you're in is crop top ready. I wish more people wore crop tops.
I'm just remembering that Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry's secretary was wearing a crop top to work every day.
I'm a no to the crop top at work, but everywhere else I'm all in.
Yeah, maybe not work appropriate, but hey, if you're, if you do what you want, whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, I'm pro crop top.
Yeah.
I wish more men wore crop tops. I wish
Sean wore a crop top on our run yesterday.
He wore a crop top today. Shout out to Sean and male crop tops.
Yeah. Awesome.
If you're a man that wears a crop top, send us a pic.
Maybe don't. Send us a pic. Send her a pic. Don't
send me your crop top pics.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. As usual, if you have any feedback, a question for a future call, you're looking for support in your running journey,
crop top pics,
please visit us on the web at microcosm-coaching.com or contact us at microcosmcoaching@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.